They say Johnny Carson and Dean Martin were best friends. Brothers, even. You've seen the photographs, the two of them laughing on golf courses, sharing cigarettes backstage at The Tonight Show. Arms slung over each other's shoulders, like men who had been through wars together. Carson trusted maybe 3 people in his entire life, and Dean Martin was one of them. For 14 years, they protected each other's secrets, covered each other's weaknesses, showed up when the other was drowning. In Hollywood, a town built on betrayal and broken handshakes, their friendship was sacred, untouchable, the kind of bond that survives divorces, scandals, and the crushing weight of fame. But on a sweltering August night in 1972, inside the crystal ballroom of the Beverly Hills Hotel, Johnny Carson looked his head of security dead in the eye and said 6 words that should have destroyed everything. Get Dean Martin out of here. Not quietly, not privately, in front of 300 people, in front of NBC executives, A-list celebrities, and every power player in television. Johnny Carson, the king of late night, the man who controlled American living rooms every weeknight at 11:30, ordered his best friend removed like a drunk causing a scene at a wedding. Security moved toward Dean. The room went silent. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every fork, every glass, every breath stopped. And Dean Martin, standing there in his rumpled tuxedo with that trademark rocks glass in his hand, did something nobody saw coming. He didn't leave. He didn't apologize. He didn't slink away like a man caught doing something wrong. Instead, he said something so devastating, so brutally honest, that Johnny Carson's face went white. And what happened in the 6 weeks after that night? What Johnny did to try to fix what he'd broken revealed the most painful truth about friendship that Hollywood had ever seen. The security guard who tried to escort Dean out that night said he'd never forget what he heard. And neither will you. Johnny Carson met Dean Martin in 1958, backstage at the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas. Johnny was nobody then, just the host of a daytime game show called Who Do You Trust, grinding through another forgettable gig, wondering if he'd ever break through. Dean was already a king. Rat Pack royalty. The guy who shared stages with Sinatra, who filled showrooms without even trying, who made drunk look like an art form. They had no business becoming friends. Johnny was Midwestern, buttoned up, controlled to the point of suffocation. Every word calculated, every gesture rehearsed, every emotion buried under 6 layers of Nebraska nice. Dean was Italian chaos, a man who seemed to live entirely in the moment, who could walk into a room and own it without a script, without a plan, without a single care about what anyone thought. But they struck up a conversation about golf, both men obsessed with the game, and something clicked. Not the surface thing, not the celebrity friendship that looks good in photographs. The real thing. Over the next 14 years, Dean Martin became part of Johnny Carson's inner circle. Not the famous inner circle, not the Ed McMahon and Doc Severinsen lineup that America saw on television. The real circle. The 3 a.m. phone calls when Johnny's 3rd marriage was falling apart and he couldn't face another night alone in that Malibu house. The private dinners where neither man had to perform, where Dean could drop the drunk act and Johnny could drop the cool act, and they could just be 2 lonely men trying to survive fame. Dean appeared on The Tonight Show more than 60 times, more than almost any other guest, and it wasn't because NBC booked him. It was because Johnny needed him, needed someone who didn't want anything from him, who didn't care about his power or his money or his ability to make or break careers with a single joke. Dean never leaked Johnny's secrets to the press, never sold him out when the tabloids came sniffing around, never used their friendship as currency, the way everyone else in Hollywood did. And Johnny protected Dean right back. When critics called Dean a washed-up drunk, Johnny defended him in rooms where it mattered. When Vegas casino owners tried to lowball Dean's pay, Johnny made phone calls that fixed it. When the world saw Dean Martin as a punchline, Johnny Carson saw him as a brother. That's why what happened at the Beverly Hills Hotel wasn't just a public embarrassment. It was a betrayal that cut so deep, neither man was sure they'd survive it. August 18th, 1972. The Beverly Hills Hotel. The Crystal Ballroom. NBC's annual summer gala. The biggest party of the television season. The night where every star, every executive, Every person who mattered in the industry gathered under crystal chandeliers to celebrate the network's dominance. And Johnny Carson was the reason they were dominant. The Tonight Show was printing money. 15 million viewers a night. Johnny wasn't just a guest of honor. He was the king. And this was his coronation. His kingdom. His night. Dean Martin arrived at 9:47 p.m., fashionably late as always, wearing a tuxedo that looked like he'd slept in it, tie loosened, that million-dollar smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. He wasn't on the official guest list. Johnny had invited him personally, off the books, the way you invite family. Dean had a rocks glass in his hand, amber liquid catching the light, and he looked exactly like Dean Martin was supposed to look. Half drunk, fully charming, completely untouchable. He worked the room like a professional, shaking hands, telling jokes, making everyone feel like they were the most important person in the world for exactly 90 seconds before moving on. People loved him. Dean Martin could walk into hell itself and make the devil laugh. Everything was perfect until 10:35 p.m. Dean was standing near the bar, talking to Fred Silverman, NBC's head of programming, the man who decided which shows lived and which shows died. The conversation started light. Golf. Ratings. The usual industry small talk. And then Dean said something. Nobody knows the exact words. Witnesses disagree. Some say Dean made a joke about NBC executives and their expensive taste. Others say he made a comment about Fred's wife, who was standing 6 feet away. Others say it was darker, something about religion or politics, or one of those third-rail topics you never touch at corporate events. Whatever it was, Fred Silverman's face went white, then red, then twisted into something ugly. He didn't say a word. He just turned on his heel and walked away, cutting through the crowd like a man on a mission. He found Johnny Carson near the main stage, grabbed him by the elbow, pulled him into a corner where the music couldn't drown out what he was about to say. Witnesses said Fred was shaking. Witnesses said Johnny's jaw clenched, that famous Carson deadpan locking into place like a vault door slamming shut. Fred Silverman said something. Johnny nodded once, twice, and then Johnny Carson, the man who never lost his cool, who built an empire on being unshakable, did something nobody expected. He walked across that ballroom, every eye tracking his movement, and found his head of security, Barry Mitchell, 6'4", former Marine, the guy who handled problems quietly. Johnny leaned in close, said something, and Barry's eyes went wide. Barry nodded, started moving toward the bar, toward Dean Martin, toward the moment that would shatter everything. Dean was laughing at something someone said, completely unaware. And then Barry Mitchell was standing next to him, leaning in, speaking quietly into Dean's ear. Dean's smile dropped. The laugh died in his throat. He turned his head slowly, scanning the room, and his eyes found Johnny Carson standing 30 feet away. Johnny was already turned, talking to someone else, refusing to make eye contact, refusing to acknowledge what he'd just set in motion. Dean Martin stood there, rocks glass halfway to his lips, frozen. Every celebrity in that ballroom suddenly watching, suddenly silent, suddenly holding their breath. And then Dean made a choice that changed everything. Dean didn't move, didn't argue, didn't lower his voice or slink toward the exit, like a man caught doing something shameful. He just looked at Barry Mitchell, the security guard standing beside him, and said loud enough for 3 nearby tables to hear, "Tell Johnny if he wants me gone. He can ask me himself." Barry's face went pale. "Mr. Martin, please. Let's not make this difficult. We can handle this quietly." Dean took a slow sip of his drink, set the glass down on the bar with a deliberate clink that echoed in the silence. "Difficult? Barry, I've known Johnny Carson for 14 years. If he's got a problem with me, he can walk over here like a man and say it to my face. That's what friends do." Conversations at nearby tables stopped completely now. Forks hung in midair. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Every power player, every executive, every celebrity in that ballroom turned to watch. This wasn't just drama. This was a public execution. And Johnny Carson was trapped. He could walk over and confront his best friend in front of everyone, humiliate him, destroy him, prove he was the king who didn't tolerate disrespect. Or he could do nothing and look weak. Look like a man who couldn't control his own event, his own kingdom. Johnny Carson crossed that ballroom like a man walking through fire. His face was stone. His hands were shoved deep in his tuxedo pockets. His eyes were cold, flat, empty of everything except control. He stopped 3 feet from Dean, didn't extend a hand, didn't smile, didn't offer any warmth. For 5 seconds, neither man spoke. The entire room held its breath. Then Johnny said, quiet and controlled, "Dean, you need to leave." Dean didn't flinch. "Why, Johnny? What did I do?" "You know what you did. Fred told me. This is my event, my reputation. I can't have you." Dean interrupted, louder now, playing to the room. "Can't have me what?" "Being myself. I thought that's why you like me, Johnny. Because I don't pretend." Johnny's jaw tightened. There's a difference between not pretending and being reckless. You embarrassed important people tonight. Important people. Dean laughed, sharp and bitter. "You mean the suits who wouldn't know a real laugh if it hit them in the face?" "This isn't about them," Johnny snapped, losing the control he was famous for. "This is about you not knowing when to stop. You never know when to stop, Dean. And I'm tired of covering for you." The words hung in the air like poison. Dean's face changed. The smirk vanished. Something dangerous flickered behind his eyes. "Covering for me? Is that what you think you've been doing?" Johnny didn't answer. Dean stepped closer, his voice dropping to something quieter, sharper, more devastating. "Johnny, I've been showing up for you for 14 years. Every time your ratings dipped, who came on the show? Every time you needed someone to make you look good, who delivered? Every time you were drowning in your 3rd divorce and couldn't face the cameras, who called you at 3 a.m. and talked you off a ledge?" Johnny's face went white, because it was true. Every word of it. "You want me gone because Fred Silverman's feelings got hurt? Fine, I'll leave. But don't you dare tell yourself you're covering for me. I've been covering for you." Johnny's voice rose now, shaking with something ugly. "You think this is about Fred? This is about you thinking you can do whatever you want because you're Dean Martin. Newsflash, pal, we're not in the Rat Pack anymore. That act is old." Dean didn't blink. "At least it's an act, Johnny. What are you without the desk? Without the monologue? You're so controlled, so buttoned up, you've forgotten how to be a human being." The room was silent. Johnny was trembling now, fury and shame and something broken rising to the surface. "Get out," he said, his voice cracking. "Get out of my event. Get out of my life." Dean stared at him for a long moment. Then he said, quietly, devastatingly, "You know what the difference is between you and me, Johnny? When I push people away, at least I'm drunk. What's your excuse?" He set his glass down on the nearest table, adjusted his tuxedo jacket, turned toward the exit. Every eye in that ballroom tracked his movement. He stopped at the door, turned back, looked directly at Johnny Carson standing there alone in the center of the room, and said, "When you get tired of being lonely, you know where to find me." The door closed behind him. Johnny stood there, trembling, humiliated, destroyed. Fred Silverman approached, tried to say something reassuring, and Johnny turned on him with a look so cold Fred actually stepped back. "Shut up," Johnny said. "Just shut up." Then Johnny Carson walked out the side exit, got into his car, and drove home. He didn't return to his own party. For 6 weeks, Johnny Carson and Dean Martin didn't speak. Hollywood held its breath, waiting to see if the friendship was dead. And then something happened that nobody expected. The next morning, every gossip column in Hollywood had the story. Dean Martin and Johnny Carson's explosive fight at NBC Gala. Friendship over. Bridge burned. The king of late night cuts ties with Rat Pack legend. Neither man commented publicly. Johnny showed up to tape The Tonight Show like nothing had happened, delivered his monologue with that trademark deadpan precision, laughed at the right moments, said goodnight to America at exactly 1 a.m. But the crew noticed. Ed McMahon noticed. Johnny's hand shook when he thought no one was watching. His jokes were sharper, meaner, like he was angry at the world and taking it out on his guests. Producers worried because Dean Martin was a ratings magnet, one of the few guests who could spike viewership by 2 million people in a single night. And now that weapon was gone. Dean's management team worried too, because Johnny Carson wasn't just powerful, he was the most powerful man in television. If Johnny wanted to, he could make Dean disappear from the industry with a few quiet phone calls. But Johnny didn't make calls. And Dean didn't apologize. 6 weeks passed, the longest they'd gone without speaking in 14 years. Friends tried to mediate. Sinatra called Johnny, told him to let it go. Sammy Davis Jr. called Dean, told him pride wasn't worth losing a brother. Both men refused. This wasn't about pride, Johnny told anyone who asked. This was about respect. This wasn't about the fight, Dean told his inner circle. This was about being seen. Hollywood assumed the friendship was over. Dead. Another casualty of ego and fame. Then on September 29, 1972, Johnny Carson walked into his dressing room at NBC Burbank to prepare for that night's taping. And there, sitting on his desk, was a photograph in a simple silver frame. Johnny stopped in the doorway, stared at it. The photograph was from 1965, a golf course. Johnny and Dean, both in their prime, arms around each other's shoulders, laughing at something the camera hadn't caught. Both men looked younger, lighter, unburdened by the weight of what fame would cost them. There was no note, no card, no explanation, just the photograph. Johnny picked up the frame with hands that trembled. He stood there for 5 full minutes, staring at two men who used to know how to be happy. His assistant knocked on the door, asked if he was okay. Johnny didn't answer. He set the frame down carefully, like it was made of glass, and picked up the phone. He dialed Dean's number from memory. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Johnny almost hung up, almost convinced himself this was a mistake, that some wounds don't heal, that some words can't be taken back. Then the line clicked. Dean's voice, rough and familiar, came through. "Took you long enough." Johnny exhaled, a sound like a man who'd been holding his breath for 6 weeks. "I'm sorry." "I know." "No," Johnny said, his voice breaking slightly. "I mean, I'm really sorry. You were right. About all of it." Dean was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I was right about most of it. But I was also a jackass at that party. I knew what I was doing. I pushed buttons because I was angry about other stuff. You got caught in the crossfire." "What other stuff?" Johnny asked. Long pause. "Doesn't matter. Point is, I shouldn't have put you in that position." Johnny sat down heavily in his chair, staring at the photograph. "I shouldn't have handled it like that. In front of everyone. You deserved better." "We both did," Dean said quietly. Another long silence, the kind only old friends can survive. Then Johnny said, "You free Thursday night? I've got a taping. Could use a guest who actually makes me laugh." "What time?" 5:30, rehearsal at 4. "I'll be there," Dean said. And Johnny, "Yeah, next time you want me out of a party, just pull me aside. I'm not a monster." Johnny laughed, a real laugh, the first one in 6 weeks. Noted. They hung up. Johnny sat there staring at that photograph until his assistant knocked again, told him they needed him on set in 10 minutes. He stood, placed the frame carefully on the corner of his desk where he could see it every day, and walked out to face the cameras. But the real reconciliation, the one that mattered, didn't happen on television. It happened 2 nights later, when Johnny showed up at Dean's house at midnight. October 7th, 1972. Dean Martin's house in Beverly Hills. Midnight. Dean answered the door in a bathrobe and slippers. No drink in his hand, no performance, no act. Johnny Carson standing on the porch in jeans and a sweater, no tuxedo, no makeup, no armor. 2 men stripped down to who they actually were underneath all the fame. "Come in," Dean said. "I'll make coffee." They sat in Dean's den, a room most people never saw, filled with photographs of his kids and golf trophies, and none of the glitz that Hollywood expected. Johnny held his coffee cup with both hands like he needed something to anchor him. Finally, he said what he'd come to say. "I didn't kick you out because of what you said to Fred. I kicked you out because I was jealous." Dean looked up, surprised. "Jealous of what?" "Of you," Johnny said quietly. "Of the fact that you can just be. You walk into a room, and you're Dean Martin, drunk or sober, and people love you. I walk into a room, and I have to be Johnny Carson, or I'm nothing. And that night, watching you not give a damn what Fred thought, I realized I've spent 20 years caring what everyone thinks. And I hated you for it." Dean leaned back, shook his head slowly. "Johnny, you know half of what I do is an act too, right? You think I'm not terrified every single day that people will figure out I'm just a broke Italian kid from Steubenville who got lucky? The drunk thing, the careless thing, it's armor. Same as your control. At least you let people see something real, Johnny said. I don't even know who I am anymore without the cameras. Dean leaned forward, looked his friend directly in the eye, then stopped performing for me. We've known each other too long for that. I don't need Johnny Carson. I just need Johnny. The words hung in the air. Johnny nodded, said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. They sat in silence for a long time. Two lonely men who decided they were less lonely together. Johnny finished his coffee around 2 a.m., stood to leave, and Dean walked him to the door. At the threshold, Johnny turned back. Thank you. For the photograph. For calling me out. For not giving up. Dean smiled, the real smile, not the Vegas one. That's what brothers do. From that night forward, they had a new rule. If one of them was drowning, the other showed up. No questions. No cameras. No Hollywood. And they never, ever let pride come between them again. This story isn't about a fight between two celebrities. It's about what real friendship costs when pride gets in the way. It's about the difference between public loyalty and private truth. It's about two men who almost lost everything because they forgot that being right matters less than being there. Johnny Carson learned that control isn't strength. Vulnerability is. That the armor he wore to protect himself from the world was also the wall keeping out the people who actually mattered. Dean Martin learned that recklessness isn't freedom. It's running away. That pushing buttons and testing boundaries is easy. But showing up with honesty when it's uncomfortable, that's the hard part. And together, they learned that real friendship means fighting and choosing to come back. For the next 23 years, until Dean's death in 1995, they were brothers. Not the Hollywood kind, the real kind. When Dean's son died in a plane crash in 1987, Johnny was one of 3 people at the private funeral. When Johnny retired in 1992, Dean sent him a letter that Johnny kept in his desk drawer until he died. The letter said, "Thanks for seeing past the act. You were one of the few who did." Hollywood is full of fake friendships, alliances built on convenience and mutual benefit that dissolve the moment they stop serving a purpose. But Johnny and Dean had something rare, a friendship that survived honesty. That night at the Beverly Hills Hotel could have ended everything. Instead, it saved everything. Because real friendship isn't about never fighting. It's about fighting and choosing to come back. It's about seeing someone at their worst and deciding they're still worth showing up for. Rest in peace, Johnny Carson and Dean Martin. 2 men who proved that loyalty isn't about always agreeing. It's about always showing up. Even when, especially when, it hurts.